About Cyrus and his reign in Persia, how he is going to create the Achaemenid Empire, named after his ancestor Achaemenid. Now, we're going to start out with after 50 years of forced exile in Babylonia. After 50 years of forced exile in Babylonia, the Jews return to Palestine. And they'll do so with the good graces of Cyrus behind him. So 40,000 of the Jews will trek 1,000 miles from Babylon to Jerusalem in the wake of Cyrus's decree, which legitimizes the full Jewish repatriation of the Holy Land of Palestine. They will return. The Jews will return with the plundered gold and silver from the Babylonian sack of the temple. Remember that the Babylonians had sacked the Jewish temple in 587-586 BC. So now that wealth will be returned to the Jews by Cyrus. Plus, Cyrus will also give the Jews a stipend for building a new temple. He's going to give them additional money to build a new temple. It was originally the Jews, and they basically had that in their temple, and it was taken from them by the Babylonians and brought back to Babylon. Now the Jews are taking this back with them, Patrick, to the Holy Land. Okay? Yes?
Was it similar to a Nazi death march, this 1,000-mile trek?
I'm sorry?
Was it similar to a Nazi death march, this 1,000-mile trek to Jerusalem?
The only similarity, Simeon, would be in the fact that it's 1,000 miles. This is much more pleasant than the death march. This is going to mean the actual happiness of the Jews returning to the land that they believe God had promised.
How did they get there? I mean,
they walked there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And some of them had animal transport, but they basically walked there. Okay? So they didn't have the Amtrak back then, so they basically had to do things in the long way. Yes, Paul? The year is going to be around 540, 550, 540, around there. You don't have to know the exact year. It's going to actually be, it will be about 536. About 536, 537. That's exact. Kimberly, had a question.
The Jews were exiled in the year before by Babylon.
That's correct. Okay. Now, the Jews are going to come back to build their new temple, and in the Old Testament books of the prophets Ezra and Nehemiah, they will both hail Cyrus and the Persians as being good guys, as being deliverers for the Jews, allowing the Jews to repatriate the land that they believe God had given to them. Now, going back to Cyrus, and this is about 530 BC. Cyrus is planning the conquest of the fertile Nile Valley. In other words, he's planning to conquer Egypt. He knows that Egypt has a great deal of agricultural wealth, so he would like to pay them a visit, conquer them, if you will. However, as he's planning this conquest, a tribe of steppe nomads called the Massagetæ you may see it spelled differently sometimes you may see it spelled with an E. Either way, it's okay. I don't think we'll point to it. The Massagetæ are basically steppe nomads, and they're led by a warrior queen. Her name, Cambyses. The Massagetæ are going to be ravaging the outskirts of the northern Persian Empire, especially the area between, and look at the map, between the Caspian and Aral Seas. This is where their swathe of activity is. It's basically not a full-scale invasion. It's looting, raiding, and looting. Now,
And that's modern day what? Just to visualize it.
okay,
Modern.
this would be modern day Iran, Turkestan, Uzbekistan, okay, the area over here. Exactly, yes.
So he was trying to sack Egypt, and then but he started having these nomads, step nomads.
That's right.
And you said they were trying, and they were which part of the Persian Empire was it? The north.
Once again, the northern part, look at the map. Once again, it's north. Caspian Sea, Aral Sea. This is the area that's being ravaged by the Macedonians. Their purpose is to hit and run. They're interested in taking portable wealth and running with it. Okay? It is not, and I repeat, it is not an attempt at conquest. This is a raid. Okay? However, it's harassing the people that are living on the borders of Iran's empire. These are Cyrus's subjects. They're appealing to him for help, and he wants to deliver help. He can't have instability in the region, which he's trying to get resources from. So what Cyrus will do is rush to engage the marauders, and in the only battle he ever lost, Cyrus will be killed facing the Macedonians. So the founder of the Achaemenid Persian Empire will meet his death in 530 against the Macedonians. Cyrus's body is going to be housed in a plain stone mausoleum, which he had designed himself while he was alive, of course. And if you look at your list of Persian Empire capitals, you'll see how to spell Pasargadae. And the reason why he's buried there is Pasargadae was the site of his first great victory. It's the site of his first great victory. Now, Persian priests will have the monthly sacrifice of a horse in his honor for many decades to come. So if you've noticed, this Zoroastrian injunction against animal sacrifice is not being enforced here. And the reason why is because officially Cyrus is not a Zoroastrian. Okay? He does have Zoroastrian beliefs, but he is not officially Zoroastrian. So every month the horse will be sacrificed at that site in his honor for decades to come. Now the son of Cyrus is Cambyses. And you're going to see his name under the Achaemenid dynasty rulers list I gave you. And you see the years that he rules, from 529 to 522. Now Cambyses wants to actualize his father's dream of subjugating Egypt. So Cambyses wants to basically carry out the conquest of Egypt. And in 525 BC, in 525 BC, at the Battle of Pelusium, Egypt will fall under the Achaemenid dynasty of Persia. So you're now going to have Persian dynasties ruling over Egypt, albeit for a very brief time. I'm going to tell you that Cambyses is going to declare himself pharaoh. That's a traditional title for an Egyptian ruler. And it means that, like other pharaohs, he's going to declare himself to be a god, a deity. Yes? Now, Cambyses is going to pay homage to Egyptian deities. He's going to honor the local customs. And he will employ Egyptians as government officials. However, Cambyses is going to become somewhat bitter when he fails to expand his empire in Africa. He's going to fail to subdue Carthage, and Carthage is in modern-day Tunisia, located right outside of the city of Tunis. and he's going to fail to subjugate Nubia, which would be in the modern country of the Sudan, okay, south of Egypt. And because he fails to subdue either one, before Nubia, would be Carthage. Now, the reason why he fails in both cases is he doesn't have the loyalty of some of his troops. In Carthage, he has a Carthaginian navy that refuses to attack their kinsmen. The reason why he fails in the Sudan, in Nubia, is because the army's provisions were poorly planned. The army's provisions were poorly planned. Meaning, in effect, he didn't give them enough food along the way. And you don't have to take this down, but they were reduced to devouring their pack animals because they ran out of food. That's never a good sign if you're going to invade another country, is it? Now, Cambyses ends up dying in 522. We're not quite sure how. There are different explanations for it. According to Herodotus, and remember that Herodotus is receiving his information from Egyptian priests who are biased. According to Herodotus, Cambyses basically became deranged and offended the Egyptian priests. But others state he kicked his pregnant wife and sister to death in a rage, and he died from a self-inflicted wound. He died from a self-inflicted wound on his way to quelling a Persian revolt. So he basically became deranged. Some people believe that he basically, had offended the Egyptian priests. They killed him. Others believe he went nuts, kicked his pregnant wife's sister to death, and then he died from a self-inflicted wound on his way to basically quelling a Persian revolt. Now, Lawrence, you had a question or comment? Look at where it's located. Whenever you buy real estate, Lawrence, and you're asked what's important about real estate, it's say this. The Carthaginians had the best maritime capacity. They settled in what would, they basically had their origins in Phoenicia, which would be modern-day Lebanon. So because they had the best naval capacity, and Persia was basically a land power, they had to rely on Carthage for all the naval maneuvers. And being that Carthage was on the water, they needed to have a naval capacity to get there. Otherwise, they're going to have to trek through barren desert or near barren desert. Okay? Yes?
It's not important because you were in Cyrus, if you feel like the policies that were going on, or
They don't want to attack their own kinsmen. Yeah. Out.
why is this? What did you guys?
Do you not have it on the sheet? Okay. Yeah.
When
Cambyses.
when he captured Egypt and he employed those Egyptian government, was that just in Egypt or was that also
Just in Egypt. Just in Egypt. No. Because in the event that you were to take anyone from a different region, make them head, or give them a governmental position in another culture, there would be a problem. In the event that you're doing record keeping and somebody basically understands Egyptian hieroglyphs, how are they going to understand the Avestan Persian language. Okay? So there's a problem there. It wouldn't be practical. Yes?
You said that the first reason was Cyrus who recorded that he became deranged and insulted the priest. Why would that cause him to die? Because the god, like that angered
That
God?
is sacrilege. In the event that you attack an Egyptian priest, you're attacking the representative of the gods. And being that Cambyses is still seen, even though he tries to portray himself as Egyptian pharaoh, he's still seen as an outsider by a lot of people, including the priests. So for him to do something like that would be like spitting in church, or, basically urinating on somebody's grave or breaking a cross in there. It's an act of sacrilege.
The gods like smote him for like vengeance?
Exactly.
Okay. Not that they killed him.
Well, there was a belief that some killed him, some believed that the gods basically incited the priest to kill him. Okay? Sure. Now, with regard to the fight for succession, I don't want to get into this because it's convoluted, and I don't want to get into this whole usurpation. But when Cambyses dies, and you see the date of his death on the Achaemenid rulers, it's 522 BC, there's going to be a usurper that's going to take the throne. There will be a usurper. A usurper is somebody who steals something. Okay, if I usurp, I take power in an illegal way. Okay? It's somebody who seizes power illegally. Okay? You're welcome. A usurper will in effect take the throne, but he's going to be deposed by a fellow who has a distant relationship to Cambyses. Distant meaning a blood relationship. This person is Darius. Okay? Now Darius is going to kill the usurper and his bodyguards, and it's going to take him a while to establish dominance over the Persian Empire. Remember, the Persian Empire is large. So it's going to take Darius about 2 years of campaigning. It's going to take Darius 2 years of campaigning to reestablish the empire's territorial integrity.
Military campaign?
That's right. Now, Darius is going to be clement with those vassals, meaning those servants, who remain loyal. But anyone who associated with the usurper, anyone who associated with that upstart who had seized power, Darius is going to retaliate with brutality against them. And when I say retaliate with brutality against the insurgents, this is what I mean. I'm going to give you an example. You don't have to take this down. Okay? One of the upstarts is a fellow named Bardish, who will have his nose and ears cut off, his tongue torn out, and was impaled, all on the order of Darius. And that's how he's going to deal with anyone who's going to will have thrown in their lot with the usurper. Okay? Now, because that usurpation is very convoluted, I don't want to subject you to that, being that I'm a little time pressed. Now, when Concord is fully restored in 521 BC, Darius will begin to expand the empire's borders. Darius will begin to expand the empire's borders by incorporating northwest India under his rule. So now he's beginning to expand the empires past his predecessors, and look at the map, northwest India here would basically mean, in effect, what would be modern-day Pakistan. Okay? Modern-day Pakistan. Exactly. Sindh and the Punjab, the 5 rivers area. Okay. Now, while Darius was a talented military leader, he will also promote himself as the embodiment of justice. And he's a very capable administrator. He's a very capable administrator for a polyglot, multi-ethnic political entity. He's a very capable administrator for a polyglot. Polyglot means multilingual, right? Many tongues. Multi-ethnic political entity. And that's what the Persian Empire will be. Now, if you're going to have an empire, how are you going to rule it? It's one thing to conquer, it's another thing to rule. And this is how Darius is going to rule the Achaemenid Persian Empire, and his descendants will do the same. He's going to organize the empire into 20 units called satrapies. You can think of it that way, yes. Yes. What you're going to have is a satrapy will be run by a crown-appointed official known as a satrap. And he is, in effect, what you'd be describing him as, a vassal of the Shah himself. Okay? Now, some of these satraps are local noblemen. Some of them are local noblemen, but most of them are members of the Persian aristocracy. So the majority of satraps will be members of the Persian aristocracy. However, for local rule, there will be exceptions. I'll explain to you what the exceptions are. Jerusalem will have a Jewish representative. And on the Ionian coast, over here, Ionia, what would be the western coast of Turkey, there will be Greek representatives in the cities. And this is Darius being sensitive to the makeup of the ethnicities there, and of the faith there in particular. Now, what's going to happen is these satraps will live in luxury as you'd expect them to do. And they're going to be supported by large agricultural expanses. They're going to be supported by large agricultural expanses. They will keep their own courts. They will legislate, collect taxes, and sometimes keep their own private armies. Over time, many of these satrapies will become hereditary fiefdoms, meaning that over time they're going to bequeath the satrapies to their male descendants. It will become generational over time. Now, there's a problem when this happens. The problem is, I could be an able administrator, but I could have a son that's an idiot. Okay? Which means the quality of the satrap's leadership will deteriorate if I have a lazy bastard, if I have a moron, if I have somebody who's mentally enfeebled, lazy, whatever. The satrapy will go to ruin. Which means that the Shah is very, very interested in keeping it running well. Rishi, show up on time too. Okay. Get it 60. Now, the Shah has an interest in making sure the satrapies run well. And what the one thing he doesn't want is to have somebody putting a satrap in their own domain, right? Okay? So he wants to keep the satraps efficient on the one hand, right? But he also wants to make sure that they're not so efficient that they'll declare themselves independent of the Persian Empire. Kennedy. Any other empire has? No.
Or like any other event where it's fun? Why doesn't it?
It's not any different. But you see, Darius is not interested in doing comparative history. Darius is interested in doing what works for him. And he's not thinking, oh, is this going to be like the Roman Empire that will come a few centuries after I'm dead? He's basically thinking about what's expedient for him. And that's why he's organizing this. Yes.
I think that Darius was otherwise known as Achaemenid. Is there any connection between them?
We'll address that later. You know, I want to get into the way he'll portray himself to the people later, and how he portrays himself as Shahs, and how he's going to actually claim a Zoroastrian basis for his rule. Okay? And Alan? No. Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason why Cyrus has satraps Jewish?
Yes, I thought that I had mentioned that before. Basically, he wanted to make sure that if there's a group of people with strong ethnicity or religion, that it would be easier if they were to be ruled by their co-religionists or co-ethnic. Okay, it makes it easier to do. Okay, and from where what? Oh no, not even, not even close. I mean, that's not a big guess, but no, not even close. The Ottoman Empire is going to rule some similar areas, but not totally. As a matter of fact, a lot of the Ottoman Empire will be in North Africa, Eastern Europe, and here. We're going to find out that a lot of the satrapies will stay actually under Iran, and later on there will be Central Asian rulers, surely. And we'll go over those later. Yes, Connie.
So we know the satraps are male, and they've passed on the generation.
All the satraps are male.
Up to the passed by generation, we'll have
Correct.
they only have female.
Then you better get a male. You're going to replace him with a male. You're not going to have a female satrap. It is a strong patriarchal empire. Yes, Paul. Oh, very much so. And we'll get to that when we talk about totally. We'll talk about that when we get to Alexander's conquest of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Of course, as you know, Alexander the Great will deal the death blow to the empire itself. Now, over time, once again, satrapies will become hereditary fiefdoms, and to ensure that the power of the satraps will be held in check, Darius is going to assign secretaries to them. Darius will assign secretaries to them who will monitor their behavior and report back to the emperor. Okay? Yes?
All the secretaries are Persian?
The secretaries, for the most part, will be Persian. That's correct. They're going to be the people that Darius trusts the most, and he's going to have them basically watch over the satraps, because you want to make sure that if someone's going to watch over the satraps, that they're not going to become seduced by the satraps into being corrupt, and then basically in effect negate what you intend to do, which is keep the satraps on a tight leash, on a short leash. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now, the imperial troops, and imperial means, of course, troops under the Persian Empire. The imperial troops, once again, are under the direct command of the Shah, and his troops will be garrisoned in each province to make sure that no satrap gets the wrong idea. And the wrong idea means revolt. Okay? Which means I'm going to take some troops that are directly under my command. I'm going to put them in your satrap in Charlotte, your satrap in Marion, yours Annie, yours Usara, to make sure you're good girls, okay? And make sure that you, in effect, are doing the right thing. And what's going to happen is, if a satrap oversteps his authority, he can be executed. And this will happen. You're going to see it in Sardis with a fellow named Dorothenes, but you don't have to take down his name. If you just know that if a satrap oversteps his authority, he can be executed. And Darius has no problems in doing that. Darius, in the event that he deals with rebellions, he deals with them this way. He gets the rebels together, and he basically has them sit down on sharp spikes. And he's going to lift up the sharp spikes so that gravity is going to push the spike through their rectum, out their mouth. They will be shish kebabbed and impaled. That's his preferred method of dealing with traitors. Okay? The Romans were not any more pleasant with regard to the way they disposed them. Okay? You know that if you're a traitor to Rome, you have a hook thrown through your body and dragged through the streets and dumped into the Tiber River. If you're a woman, you would get the same treatment. If you're a female traitor and you're a virgin, the executioner would rape you first and then kill you. So, usually sedition is the most execrable crime you can have against the state itself. So the state wants to make sure they make an example of you in the event that you feel your testosterone level is high enough to challenge the Shah. Okay? Now, many laws will be codified in provinces that had never seen written law codes before. So you're going to see many laws be codified in provinces that had never seen written law codes before, and Persian law was noted for its consistency and its impartiality. And that's what garnered respect for Persian law. Okay, the fact that it was consistent, it didn't play favorites, and it wasn't a type of law that would change if you were wealthy or if you were poor. Whether you were affluent or destitute, you get the same law and you get the same punishment. No favoritism, no club fed. Okay, nothing like that in the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Taxes are now based more accurately on the carrying capacity of the land over several years. Sure, you're going to basically see taxes that are based more accurately on the carrying capacity of the land over several years, meaning they're going to basically assess what the land is capable of producing. And what the usual tax on land is 20% of the annual yield, except in cases of famine or drought, okay, in which the Iranian government, the Persian government will take consideration of. But it's approximately 1/5 of the annual yield. Now, taxes will be collected in each satrapy. Taxes will be collected in each satrapy by a Persian treasurer. Taxes will be collected in each satrapy by a Persian treasurer who will set aside a portion for the local government, and he's going to send the rest to the emperor. So the Persian treasurer in each satrapy will set aside a portion of taxes for local government and then send the rest to the emperor. Think of it as local taxes versus federal tax, right? You're going to have some that will go to the state, you'll have some go to the municipality, you'll have some go to the central government. Think of it that way if it helps you. Okay? Now, other taxes, and taxation is important, even though it's not the sexiest thing in the world to study, unless you're an accounting major, which I hope you're not. But in the event that you are, you know that taxes are important because this is how a government has its budget. Just like you need a budget when you've got to pay your rent, pay your food, pay for your clothing. You need to have money set aside. You need to allocate for this. Governments have budgets too, and it's important to know how the Persian dynasties under the Achaemenids, how the Persian Empire under the Achaemenids are run. Other taxes are assessed on transactions, meaning sales taxes. There'll be taxes on water, port usage, mining, and other industrial activities. So you're going to see other taxes assessed on transactions, water, port usage and mining, and other industrial activities. Now, there'll be one tax-exempt region, and that will be the homeland for Persia. That is a province of Fars. Fars will be exempt from all taxes. But everyone else has to pay them. But what's interesting is that certain regions will only pay their taxes in certain ways. And I'll explain to you what I mean. When Babylonia pays taxes, they will pay in silver. North India will pay in gold, and the portions of northern Arabia that pay taxes to the Achaemenid Persian Empire are going to pay their taxes in frankincense. Frankincense is an aromatic resin, meaning in effect it's a resin that has perfume-like quality. Okay, those are one of the gift items you know that are given to the Christ child. Sean, yes.
Not having like come up on exchange, gold and silver rise falling value every year.
Very rarely. Because precious metals had universal value in the Persian Empire, they were always accepted for any method of payment and always a preferred method of payment. In the event that you would pay in non-precious commodities, you would have to give, of course, a great deal more, say of frankincense, than, say, gold coinage. Yes? It's run directly by the Shah himself. Yes, Patrick? North India. We'll talk about that when we get to it. Yeah, usually agricultural surplus. Right, as you thought about it. And Josh and then Cindy.
So the 20% the agricultural tax, that would be converted into gold and then shipped to the capital?
For the frankincense, it actually take it the way it is and ship
So
it.
not frankincense, like let's say North Africa or Babylonia, or North India or Babylonia, that you said they paid taxes in gold.
Right.
That's, let's say they had fields, they planted stuff, then they
Oh, okay, no. Okay, I understand what you're saying. If it's agricultural taxes, you get 20% of the yield.
So they send
But-
actual food?
They're going to send food. That will be known as taxes in kind. Taxes in kind, Josh, are when you pay your taxes in a commodity rather than specie. Okay? Now, for gold, silver, and frankincense, farmers are not going to produce that. The people that pay that are going to be people that tend to live in towns and cities.
Like if you're paying a port tax, you pay it in gold or silver. Right?
Exactly. That's what I meant by taxes and port usage, taxes for water, taxes for mining. You would pay in those commodities. Okay? And Simeon?
When the Spain were bringing over a lot of gold and silver from the New World, there was inflation because they had so much silver and gold in their economy. Did something similar happen to the Persian Empire because there was so
At
much?
times, but I will tell you that the influx wasn't as dramatic as it was during Spain's reign over the Americas. It wasn't Spain's reign over the Americas was primarily extractive. And that's one thing they really look for. That's what Cortez looked for. That's what the Pizarro brothers looked for. That's what Valdivia, Coronado, Cabeza de Vaca, and the various other Spanish conquistadores or would-be conquistadores looked for. But generally speaking, gold wasn't found throughout the Persian Empire, only in pockets. So the idea of having a golden glut, basically create these inflationary spirals, that was rarely the case. Okay? Sure. And Eric, did you have a question or comment?
Yes, my question, I missed a little bit.
That's okay.
Fars is exempt from taxes because they were,
The creche for the Achaemenid Persian Empire. That's where the Persians came from. Okay? That's their origin. That's their city of origin. Okay? Now, to integrate the realm and accelerate commerce and tax collection. To integrate the realm and accelerate commerce and tax collection. Remember that this is important because trade and money is the lifeblood of any empire. You can't do anything without revenue collection. Darius is going to build a vast system of transportation arteries. Darius is going to build a vast system of transportation arteries, which Cyrus had originally started to construct. So Darius is going to build, in other words, a huge road network. And the most heavily traveled road network will be the Sardis to Susa road network. Okay, so that's going to be Sardis to Susa. Susa is located in the small city of Shush. And no, I'm not telling you to be quiet. Okay, it's actually called the town of Shush. It's located in the lower Zagros Mountains, right about here. Okay, Sardis would have been located on the Ionian coast. It was the capital of Lydia. So this is 1,700 miles of paved road. Okay, now it's annually maintained by workers and policed by soldiers. It's annually maintained by workers and policed by soldiers. It's composed primarily of hard-packed earth. It's composed primarily of hard-packed earth, which is leveled and paved with stone as needed. And there's a very elaborate construction undertaking. Ken?
Is this sort of like a silk road?
Is this kind of like a Silk Road?
Yeah.
You could think of it as Silk Road. You could think of it as an Appian Way. You could think of it as any particular type of trade artery you want. What's important is the fact that this is going to link 1,700 miles worth of trade emporia together and make it easy for people to do business with each other. Now, what's going to happen is along this highway there are 4 heavily guarded checkpoints, 7 ferry crossings, and there are 111 inns that are spaced apart. There are 111 inns that are spaced apart by 1 day's journey. How much in a day's journey? About 15 miles. That's how much you do in a day. Yes. There are going to be 7 ferry crossings. Okay? So in effect, this is going to be heavily policed. And you're going to have these inns, or hostels, if you will, that are going to shelter the following people. Yes?
Can anybody go along these ways, or certain people?
Well, everyone except brigands. And let's talk now about who the hostels will shelter. And you'll know that. Okay? They're going to shelter dignitaries, meaning foreign ambassadors. Okay? Merchants. And messengers. And they're going to be stationed in, even though they don't use this term for it, this term will be used basically for the enclosures in the Silk Road and Muslim trading caravans, but what are referred to as caravanserais. These will be set up. And what a caravanserai is going to be basically a walled corral, a walled enclosure for the protection of men and animals from brigands. A brigand, if you do not know what that is, how many people do not know what a brigand is? It is a dacoit or a thief. Okay, a robber. Brigandage is robbery. Now, other major highways, besides the Sardis to Susa road, will be from the Iranian plateau over here to Bactria and what would be Afghanistan. Right over here. Okay, that's another major trade artery. And also the Iranian plateau, but this time going to Palestine and later on to Egypt. connecting the Iranian plateau with movement and trade going west. Now, along these routes, Darius will establish a royal messenger service. And this royal messenger service will deliver documents between the central government and the satrapies. Yes, it's one of the first post offices. Okay? This is going to be one of the first post offices. Now, all intervals along major routes will have relay systems. That have posts providing fresh horses and riders, very much like the Pony Express, if you're familiar with the history of the American West. And these fresh horses and riders would be changed every 15 miles. Remember that 15 miles is a day's journey. And you don't have to take down what I'm going to tell you next, but this is what Herodotus says about the Persian royal messengers. And this will sound very familiar to you. Nothing stops these couriers from covering their allotted stage in the quickest possible time. Neither snow, rain, heat, nor darkness. What does this sound like, the motto? Very good. Very good, Erica. This is basically where the United States Post Office took its logo from. Okay? Strangely enough. So basically, anytime you hear some Iran bashing, you could just mention, well, your post office has basically a saying that relates to the Iranian trade networks. Okay, they probably wouldn't even know that themselves. They probably tell you, want to buy a book of stamps? Or get out of here, buddy. You don't have the time for a wise guy. Okay, now, as far as payment for service to the Persian state, and when I mean service, I mean military service. Remember that the Persian state is a military empire. So the greatest service you could do for the Persian state is military service. Meaning, if you're a very effective archer, effective horseman and charioteer, you can get land as your payment. This is not unlike the Romans that distinguish themselves in battle, and upon their discharge, get land as a payment. So you're going to get land as payment for service to the Persian state, and high officials will have local overseers manage your extensive holdings. So in the event that you're good enough to get yourself a huge parcel of land, you can't manage it yourself. You're going to be responsible for military duty, which means you get somebody to stay home, and he's going to act as your overseer. Now, the serf worked the states. The serf, and is there anyone here who does not know what a serf is? I don't mean, surfing, okay? A serf is a peasant who is tied to agricultural production. They're not slaves, but they must stay bound on the land doing agricultural activity. The serf, and this is spelled S-E-R-F, the serf worked the states of Persian-ruled Egypt and Babylonia. The serf worked the states of Persian-ruled Egypt and Babylonia will produce abundant crops of wheat, barley. Barley is very good cereal grain. It grows very well under saline conditions. Saline means salty conditions. It grows very well in brackish water. Okay? Dates. I don't mean the type you have every weekend. I mean the fig-like fruit, of which I like very much. And sesame and millet. And millet is a type of cereal grain. And abundant crops of these are produced. Now, as lucrative as production was, and you need these crops because if you're going to have an empire, you need to have people eating. When people die, you can't tax them, they can't fight, so you have to make sure that people eat and eat well. Now, production is lucrative, but as lucrative as it is, Darius is always looking to augment crop production. And this is how he's going to try to do it. He's going to renew Babylonia's welter of irrigation ditches. Okay? Babylonia had a whole mess of irrigation ditches, but the irrigation ditches would become overworked, eroded, not properly maintained, salt collection was not taken away from them. So in effect, what he's going to do is he's going to reestablish the irrigation ditches. In the arid Iranian plateau and the Zagros Mountains, in the arid Iranian plateau and the Zagros Mountains, water for agriculture had to be brought in from highland springs. It has to be brought in from highland springs, but the problem is that it's brought through a semi-desert, which basically means what, Mr. Azizi? What does it mean? Are you with me? Are you okay? Did you get proper rest? Okay, I need you to stay with me. Anyone else who's paying attention? Lawrence. Very good. Evaporation through semi-arid conditions. Thank you. It's as simple as that. Okay. Now, to prevent this, Darius is going to order the construction of long underground aqueducts. And we've seen these long underground aqueducts before. We remember what they're called. Very good, Alan. Canals. Okay? Which bring more land under cultivation. And what's interesting is you're going to see some adaptations by Darius that are going to make agriculture burgeon in the Persian Empire. First of all, you're going to see the implementation of what will be known as a Persian wheel. The Persian wheel is a water wheel, and it's going to raise the level of the water. And you want it to raise the level of water so this way you can irrigate. Okay? You're going to see the implementation of Persian wheel. And then you're going to see Persia begin to make trade with other countries so it can diversify its food supply. What other countries? China. China, at this particular point in time, is under the Zhou dynasty. And this is what Persia is going to get from China. They'll import rice. They'll also import what the Greeks refer to later as Persian fruit, and these are the fruits that come from China. Don't worry about it. That's who they're trading with. Okay? Yeah. We don't have to worry about that. It's not a class on Chinese history. This is the government that they dealt with. Yes. That's okay. It's all good. Peaches and apricots. Very good. And that's what was referred to as Persian fruit. Now, cultivators are urged to try novel farming techniques. Cultivators are urged to try novel farming techniques, and they're going to be encouraged to grow unfamiliar crops. So what's going to happen is you're going to see crown agents. Yes?
What is cultivated the serf?
The cultivators will be the serfs, right? Anyone basically involved in growing crops. The cultivators will be urged to try novel farming techniques and grow unfamiliar crops. Now, Crown agents will forward seed packets. Okay, Crown agents will be forwarding seed packets for use in different satrapies. And I'm going to give you an example so you can see how the food production of the Achaemenid Persian Empire is going to skyrocket. What you're going to see is you're going to see Indian rice grow in Mesopotamia. Rice that was in India grows in Mesopotamia. Grapes and pistachios from Anatolia and Iran. Grapes and pistachios from Anatolia and Iran will grow in Syria, and alfalfa, that's basically a cereal grain slash grass feed. Alfalfa, doves, and peacocks will be brought to Europe through Persia, and alfalfa is usually used for horse fodder. Alfalfa is usually used to feed to horses. That's correct. And alfalfa is used for horse fodder. It's used to feed horses.
Where is this coming from again? The alfalfa?
It's the alfalfa, doves, and peacocks will be brought to Europe by Persia itself. And sesame from Persia will make its way into Egypt. Sesame from Persia will make its way into Egypt. So this gives you an idea of all these things that are being bandied about. Now, if you look at this just as some kind of, boring grocery list of items, you're missing the point. What this basically means is it's culinary diversification. And when I taught history of science years ago, and I asked people why human beings live longer now than they did before, usually most people raise their hand and go, because of medicine. They can't even cure the freaking common cold. Okay? It's because of greater hygiene and greater food diversification. Remember your food pyramid? And remember how you're supposed to get all sorts of different nutrients? Look at the panoply. Look at the farrago food that's now readily available to the Persian Empire. They augment their food supply, ward off starvation and malnutrition. When you do that, you keep the population healthier. A malnourished person is more susceptible to epidemics and disease. Okay? So this is actually very important. And all of these items are traded. Trade means money. And it also means taxable income to the state. So keep in mind why it's important. Now, Darius, yes, I'm sorry, Josh.
We're saying that Darius has made like a lot of innovations. Is there versus like a lot of other leaders? He's military expert. He's great at bureaucracy. He's great at that. Where is he getting most inspiration on this innovation from?
Good question. It's like asking why some students like you are very good and some others suck. It's like asking why some scholars are very good and others not as much. It's individual variation, right?
What was his muse?
Good question. I think this is a very ambitious man who was very talented, and he basically had a certain amount of charisma, and he had the ability to think outside the box. It's one of these things that's inexplicable. And I mean, you see it sometimes with families too. It's interesting, but nobody in my family was interested in history. Yet I was. When my father did read, he tended to like to read novels about the mafia and, organized crime. I don't know what that says about him, but, it's individual variation. If you're saying that this is an extremely capable man, he is. And that's why the empire will prosper. Because you see, if you have someone like this in it ruling an empire, the empire is going to fare well. If you have, on the other hand, adults presiding over it, he's going to preside over its demise, right? And in the future, Your Honor, you know to go behind me and not in front of me. Yes. Rice, I think, is good enough, Alan. Okay, as well as peaches and apricots. The rice itself is good. I'll tell you, red rice is a great crop to grow. Both wet rice and dry rice. Rice has a lot of nutrients in it. And there are over 2,000 varieties of rice. And without going into detail, it's because China came up with a quick ripening strain of rice that actually caused China's population to burgeon during the Qing Dynasty. In 1830, China had over 400 million people, more people than we have in the United States right now. And that had to do with quick ripening rice. There are over 2,000 different varieties of rice, excluding wild rice. Wild rice is not rice, it's a type of aquatic grass. Yes? Well, that's going to come sometimes invariably. And you can't pull Darius in the event that trade would bring people into contact with other pathogens. For the most part, hygiene and food diversification, everything was different back then. People tended to have, on the whole, throughout the world, a much shorter life. They didn't understand the microbe theory of disease that was postulated by Girolamo Fracastoro in the 15th century, but he didn't have a microscope to prove that. So it wasn't validated until Pasteur, the French chemist, would actually prove the germ theory of disease by using a microscope to basically identify staph and strep infection. Yes, please. Generally speaking, anthrax, smallpox, mumps, TB, rubella, diphtheria came from animal transmission to human beings. But human beings can transmit it from one to the other too, but it's not a history of epidemiology. So I don't want to take it outside. Remember what I did say, that I need everyone, while your questions and comments are all welcome, to keep things as tight as possible, okay? And I have to proceed. Paul, wait 1 second, if you will. Is it urgent question? Go ahead. Okay, not a problem. Let me get back to you on that. Yes?
Also, one of the main areas of domestication of numerous animal species.
That's 100% true.
And brain, and that's why it's a cradle of civilization.
Very much so. And it has riverine loci, very much like India had and China had, and Egypt, of course. These are your great riverine civilizations. What you say is, in fact, 100% true. Now, Darius is also going to standardize currency, and he's going to prohibit gold coinage outside of his royal mint. So no one could basically coin gold outside of the Persian royal mint that's within the empire. And he's going to impose a standard value for each coin. And you know what I mean by standard value for each coin. Go into your pocket, you take a look at the coins. You have a quarter, you have a dime, you have a nickel. That's a standard value for each coin. Okay? It represents what each coin is worth. And there'll be a standard value for that. Why? So this way it makes currency transactions easier. Okay? As you know, ladies and gentlemen, that a barter, to go around me. Like, how many times do I have to say this? Holy shit. Basically, in effect, you know that what coins do is they're going to facilitate transactions. Okay? In the event that you're a butcher, I need a steak, and you need light bulbs, okay? I'm going to have to figure out where the hell you are. You're going to have to figure out where I am, and then I have to figure out how many light bulbs equal a steak. And by the time I find out where you are, you find out where I am, we waste a great part of the day, and we love stuff back and forth. Isn't it easier to carry coins inside a purse which have a recognized standard of value to facilitate trade? And Darius understands this. So that's what he's doing. He's creating a universal coinage for the Persian Empire. So what he's going to also do is he's going to create a coin that has a standard value that's accepted as far away as Central Europe. This is going to be a coin named after him. It's going to be the gold Darius.
As far as where?
As Central Europe.
When they do come into contact with other coinage, is there any way to change money or?
To tell you the truth, back then, you didn't have an established currency system in Central Europe. It was as backward as you could possibly be. Okay? This is going to be like, how should I say, and I see you, Pamela, I'll be with you in a second as soon as I finish. This is going to be kind of very rustic in Central Europe. Persia is an advanced civilization. Europe, during the, Central Europe, during the 500 BC, is basically a bunch of half-naked savages running around. Okay? Now, I'm basically being a little extreme in how I say that, because it's kind of cold up there, so I imagine they wouldn't be as half-naked during the winter. They freeze to death. But it's basically agrarian. It's not an urban-based environment like the Persian Empire is. But yet, they'll find these gold coins to be of immense value and give up a lot of animal or agricultural wealth for it. Okay, David? Now, Pamela, you have a question.
You might have just answered it. Once this is created, he establishes this, what happens to the taxes being paid in gold and frankincense and all that? Does that continue?
Okay, it will continue because he's going to tax people based upon what they have at hand.
What they
to
can
pay.
offer.
Right. So he's not going to expect his agricultural surplus. It's not tied into an urban-based currency economy where most of the currency is going to trade. It's going to trade mostly internally in the empire in the cities. Okay? It will find its way out of there because gold and silver have universal value in other civilizations, Pamela. But if it's going to be an indigenous farmer, he's not going to be tied into the Persian mercantile economy, so he is going to have to pay an agricultural produce or anything else in there. Yes, Josh.
On an economic level, it was still based off of gold. Like, it wasn't like not valued based on how much gold you could trade for it or how much it weighed, was it? It wasn't like
what's going to happen is
value.
when he develops a royal mint, Josh, he's going to standardize the size and the weight of the coinage, okay? And what will circulate inside the Persian Empire itself will all be standardized. And he's going to standardize weights and measures too, so that this way you don't have one coin that's filled with base metal. He's going to have an exact weighing of say 100% or close to 100% gold. Okay?
Is the gold worth its weight in gold?
Yes, you might say that. It might have come from that, but I'll tell you one good thing about gold. It's soft, it's malleable, and you can melt it very easy. So you can turn it into other objects easy and also change, in effect, its weight and standard. However, if you cannot do that when it's already minted by Darius, that would be a crime. That would be like, in effect, making your own money. Okay? Yes, Liz?
Can you just repeat what you said about gold to Darius, because it's something about gold?
Yeah, he's going to create, in effect, basically a royal mint, and it'll impose a standard value for each coin. And the coin that he's going to use as a standard gold coin is known as a Darius, named after him. And it's going to circulate as far away as Central Europe, and it's going to have, of course, universal value. Now, what the coinage basically does also is it enables countries to directly trade with each other, which had not done so before. Why? Because, once again, it's a lot easier for me to carry a bag of gold coins to trade with someone far away than it is for me to take oxygen. Okay? So think about it that way. If you're willing to accept gold, it's very easy for me to ship that. Okay? So that's an advantage to a specie economy. And specie, of course, means coinage. Now, Basically, the areas that a lot of this coinage will circulate in will be Babylonia, which already had a specie-based economy, and mainland Greece, which Persia will have issues with later.